Hello and welcome to Your Health Moment podcast. I'm your host, Max Sturdivant, better known as Dr. Fitness. On this podcast, I want to give you the tools to start, continue, and never give up on your journey towards health. Now, whether you struggle with your weight, eating the right food, hydration, exercise, or even time management, you're in the right place, and I'm here for you. Now, let's dive right into this episode. I'm really happy to be here today. And the next guest actually kind of said, you know what, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. So that's kind of helpful because people that do wellness, I mean, we really do it because we have a passion for it. And my next guest is definitely in that same boat. Mr. Greg Elliott is going to be my guest today. Now, Greg is on a mission to educate and inspire everyone to take hold of their own health and to take hold of their well-being so that people can live a long and healthy and happy life. You know, as a healthcare practitioner and long-time thought leader in the area of HRV. Now, a lot of people probably won't know what that is, heart rate variability. Greg put all of his knowledge into his practice, and besides leading a very busy life as an osteopath, entrepreneur, husband, father of two. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet, but Greg's going to fill us in on that. He understands the frustrations of navigating this mess of healthcare information system that we find ourselves in. So don't think Greg is just a great big old brain. There's more to him to that. He has an infectious personality and contagious enthusiasm, which truly sets him apart. Hey, Greg, welcome to Your Health Moment, and thank you for being here to share your insights with us today.
Of course, thank you for taking the time as well. And again, as we talked about beforehand, this collaboration is really what's going to make this movement, push this movement to to get the message to every individual that the fact that they have a lot of control over their health and well-being and take health ownership. It's exciting, and thank you for doing all this.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of people don't realize the power that they do have in their hands. And it's funny, today, I'd like to get right into HRV. Can you explain what is heart rate variability?
Yeah, this is something that I got first introduced during my master's thesis. I was doing some validation around non-invasive ways of measuring heart function, and some validating different technologies that I introduced to this concept. And we'll dive deep into some of that. But just to get off, to define it, what it actually is, how I explain it is everyone's very familiar with heart rate, right? 60 beats per minute, 90 beats per minute. But what we find to be significantly more important to understand the overall health and well-being of the individual is the frequency of which those beats occur. So Max, you and I can have a resting heart rate of 60 beats per minute, where mine beats like a metronome, super consistent every second on the second. Where yours varies, it goes up and down in a nice kind of wave type of pattern, up to 70 down to 50. What we know now is that you are in a healthier, happier state than I am, which is very counterintuitive to what people think, because we think of homeostasis. We got to be consistent. Everything's got to maintain a specific balance. If something's introduced, we got to make sure that we maintain a specific environment. But it's actually the opposite when it comes to we want more variability in the heart rate. And what we have found is that through all areas of health, through biological, psychological, and social determinants of health, we want greater heart rate variability.
Isn't that crazy? Like you said, most people don't even realize that, but even from the wellness standpoint, we need that variability. We don't grow until we're challenged to the point of growing. And I think, and that's spiritually, that's mentally, that's physically, that's in every way. So if homeostasis, if we stayed the same, there's really no growth. So I had no idea we could connect that with our heart rate variability as well. So that's a pretty powerful point.
Yeah, one of the things that I say about heart rate variability is it's seen as a marker for homeostatic capacity. So our total ability to maintain homeostasis in the presence of a stressor, like overall. So the higher variability we have, the greater ability to maintain a stable internal environment through all structures of our body. So that's one way that I kind of utilize it when I talk to various doctors and other type of practitioners of saying, hey, from a scientific realm, this is kind of where we see this metric trending, and understanding this metric is, can your patient, can your clients deal with a lot of stress right now? Can they take on a lot of stress, or is there something already stressing their body?
And so can you give us an example of something or someone that the variability has really been helpful for them when they're encountering a certain level of stress or change?
Totally. So a lot of the research early on was looking at already relatively stressed or poor health individuals, people with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, people with any type of cancer. So the very objectively measurable type of conditions. Where I found the value significantly was what we call the invisible illnesses, right? You talk about the chronic pain conditions. You talk about chronic fatigue. You talk about anxiety, PTSD, these conditions that don't have a pure objective measurement to determine progress or diagnosis. This is where I found to be super powerful. So primarily a lot of my clientele in our clinic that we see are people in this area, these kind of invisible functional type of illnesses. And it's a phenomenal feedback mechanism, because we know people that suffer from these type of conditions, their nervous system and stress is a gigantic factor, and it plays a huge role into their condition symptomology. So this provides us an objective feedback into that area. So, there's a lot of examples over the last decade of me doing this clinically into that side of things. People, not, relying on alcohol as a coping mechanism for their pain anymore. People understanding that when their stress is high through this objective marker, they have a tendency to suicidal thoughts, and be able to make sure that you mitigate that as soon as possible from there. People that didn't know they had certain medical illnesses, that I told them to go get checked, and were able to get onto the right medications and be able to deal with the illnesses quicker.
Wow.
So many different stories around this. One of the earliest stories that I had that kind of gave me the aha moment, I'll explain that one, where as soon as I started to learn about it a little bit more, I wanted to be able to try this out with my friends. And at the time I was working as a clinical exercise physiologist before I went to osteopathy school, and had 5 people that I had. There was a company that wasn't too far away. We got some heart rate straps and the mobile app that they had, and so we started testing these various things and started looking at various numbers of what normal was and everything. And I remember one morning a colleague of mine, she came in and she goes, "Greg, my heart rate variability is really low today, but it was fine. I had a great night. I slept well. I woke up. I think everything's absolutely fantastic. Why is my heart rate variability low?" And I go, "No idea." At that time, I was like thinking, well, you didn't train, nothing's out of the ordinary. I have no idea what's going on. Literally, probably within 2 hours, she was so sick, she had to go home and call the rest of the day. And that is not an uncommon thing to have, that before symptomology happened from her acute illness, is predicted her illness before she actually had any kind of subjective symptoms before it. And I was like, oh, and this is not the first time. It's not the last time. It's happened multiple times from people where they're able to see these various shifts into what's going on. Now, this individual is more drastic and it was more predictive. Sometimes it doesn't happen this way for some individuals, but there's some people where it's very much can be a predictive nature, until where the body's under stress and saying, hey, I may be going or fighting something. My immune system's working, so my heart rate variability goes down because there's a stressor in my body. This is a pathogen in that standpoint. And so they are starting to be able to figure, oh, okay, well, now I know that I need to make sure that I de-stress today, that I make sure that I get good food in, make sure that I get a lot of hydration. I plan to make sure that I, go to bed a little bit early tonight. Prioritize recovery on that day. It's kind of like a little warning sign for them.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. Now I know it's really difficult to have a strapped heart rate monitor on you all the time. That just wouldn't be practical. So, what's your workaround? Because I would think the best way to do this is to monitor over a long period of time.
Completely agree. Yeah. So how it used to be done in the commercial setting would be the fact that you would wake up in the morning, you put a heart rate strap on, you would open a couple applications at the time. This is back in the early 2010s. Open up an application, you would take anywhere from about a minute to typically about 3 minutes of a measurement at that time, and then you would go about your day. Had significant limitations, especially when it comes to compliance with patients and clients, whether they would forget, they would go travel, they forget their heart rate strap, they went out the night before, so they didn't want to wear it and wake up in the morning and do that, different times of the day, and so it was a little bit of a mess at that standpoint. So what I always knew that was on the horizon, and what everyone always stated at that point, is that the gold standard would be if we can get heart rate variability measured through the nighttime. Right, so that was kind of like, everyone's like, oh, that would be the goal, but there's nothing out right now that we can do that unless you want to buy a Holter monitor. Exactly, and this is where wearables start to be able to become more predominant. And at the time, it was funny. I was at a medical clinic for a while there, and there were a lot of people where Fitbit exploded, where everyone started getting Fitbits, and the amount of consults that I had with people where they go, I want a stress test. I was reading a book and my Fitbit said my heart rate was 180 beats. I think I'm having heart problems. I need to get a stress test done. I'm very concerned. And so you would get them on the stress test, and it was happened more and more and more with these false readings of heart rate. And so if you couldn't get heart rate right, you're not going to get the little nuanced heart rate variability values that you need to be able to determine the true heart rate variability. So I didn't put a lot of emphasis into wearables at that point because I didn't think they would be able to get the information. Fast forward to today, and as you have the Apple Watch on and various wearable technology, the technology has exponentially grown to where now some wearables can actually be very close, especially nocturnally through the night, very close to an ECG, to a gold standard Holter monitor, and you get some pretty accurate heart rate variability values. And so this really changed a lot for me, where people now, it's passive capture. They don't have to do anything. They wake up and they sync it to their phone, and then they're good to go. They don't have to put a heart rate strap on. They don't have to open an app. They don't do this type of stuff. And rather than have one single number, we now have 60, 80, 100 numbers, depending on the wearable device, that we can be able to look at all the specific values for individuals and see where things are going. Are they going in the right direction? So I completely agree. This kind of continuous measurement from a nocturnal standpoint was a definite game changer in regards to measuring and monitoring heart rate variability.
This kind of data is just gold. I mean, it is gold. Clinicians have been wanting this kind of data forever. Can you imagine? It's like, man, it's like all there at your fingertips, from AFib now to how much they're moving, to what's going on with their heart rate, what's happening while they're sleeping, like all day collecting data. Wow. Do you see, I can definitely see some good there. Do you see any challenges with this new technology as you're moving forward?
Yeah. So when it comes to, and this is where I've run into, and everyone that I've talked to, as soon as they hear about heart rate variability and dig into it a little bit, they get very interested in using it. So I've done a lot of consultations with other practitioners, medical doctors, facilities. Hey, would love to be able to get heart rate variability monitoring in and be able to kind of see this type of stuff, which is great. The difficulty, honestly, in heart rate variability is its actionability. I love it, the fact that it's simple. If something's going on in your body, it will let you know. Pretty darn acutely, chronically, it will let you know exactly what's going on, whether your body's stressed or not stressed, if fighting something is in a good spot or bad spot. The difficulty is, well, where is that coming from? That's the hard part, right? In the way that we deal with things now, and again, with everything that we're trying to be able to push, just like yourself, is that we have to look at the person, right? And not the symptoms and what A equals B. We can't have a siloed health and wellness approach. You can't. You can't just have one specific area and be like, oh, this is going to solve the problems. I'm sure you and I graduated with our degrees and be like, oh, we now have all the tools to help anybody we want to be able to do. And then we get into practice, you realize, wow, I have this much of a tool set. And either to the point that I got to educate and kind of help around, or I surround myself with other practitioners that know what's going on. And so that's when early on when I got in and looking at heart rate variability, that the physical activity, exercise, nutrition, and sleep only have a certain impact in certain individuals, where there's other areas of health and well-being that also need to be able to address, like the psychosocial aspects from there. there's a lot of great stuff that we can do from those big three, with the biological factors that I kind of how I call them. But if we don't necessarily address the mentality of the individual, the emotional regulation, the amount of interoception or mind-body connection, do they have purpose and self-acceptance? Are they surrounded themselves with good people, have good relationships, and feel supported? All of these things will play into heart rate variability. So we have a practitioner that says is a physical therapist or a physiatrist or a dietitian. They have their scope and what they're going to. But to really improve heart rate variability, you cannot ignore the other factors. I saw the gigantic shift in heart rate variability during COVID, when pretty much the only thing that really changed is our social interactions, with other things. But that was a gigantic piece of what's going on for that long period of time. We couldn't meet with people. We couldn't see our friends. This was our only form of communication with anyone that we loved. And you see that social experiment and how that impacted our physical and mental health and well-being. So if we don't have these strong relationships, I have a handful of people that I deal with. That is why that they're going under certain having poor heart rate variability. Why they have these continuous invisible illnesses is that it's the relationships with people, friends, family that are keeping in this kind of poor health cycle that is the drivers into everything that's going on. So unless that's addressed, I'm not going to be able to move heart rate variability very much, or to the state that we want to be able to be at, because we have to look at the whole person. So that's, from a practitioner standpoint, that's the complication. And then a whole other topic is now we have all this health data that's out there that people now own, all these major companies. And then you talk about what are they going to do with that and selling your data. It's one of the biggest conversation points right now when it comes to med tech and health tech is, who owns, we get this a lot, is, well, who owns this data? Does the wearable own this data? Do you own this data? What are you going to do with my data from that standpoint? Because they want to make sure that, this can't be used against them. And so with this growing excitement of wearable technology and what it can do to health and well-being, you start to see some of the side of, well, what could this possibly lead to if it's to the wrong hands?
I don't even know where to go. I'm excited.
Well,
first, I'm
topic,
super excited about the technology. I mean, I am. I think I'm more excited about it than I'm fearing it. I do know that there's that going on, but then you're just hitting so many fantastic points. And I kind of want to get some of our listeners are a little slower where it comes to maybe understanding some of the stuff that we may be speaking about. So I just want to backpack a little bit so we don't lose anybody, because I'm like so enthralled in the conversation. I'm like loving it, but I want to make sure everyone else is getting that same great experience from listening to Mr. Greg. Greg, like you touched on so many really cool points. Let me go back. I'll say one of the points you touched on, I think is really amazing, is the wearable is going to give you some information, but it may not give you a diagnosis. So you're going to need support where it comes to diagnosis. The information is very helpful, but there's going to be a lot more involved to really get that information to a place where it's really going to be usable for you. And having support and having an expert like Greg, for example, is going to be a really good way to go. Someone that you could take the data to, who can help you to make the best use of it. And I think that's going to be really important. Really having a confidant or a wellness strategist that can help you to do the work. Because unfortunately, we do it ourselves. It doesn't really work that well, because none of us can be really that objective when it comes to ourselves. And it's really great to have an objective person look at the data, not just you. So be okay with reaching out to support when it comes to this. So I'm a believer in wearables, but I do believe not to get to the point where I'm trying to even diagnose something about myself because of it. The data is helpful because it'll let me know, oh, you missed that workout and this is what happened. You need to get back in it. So there are easy ways that you can use it, but I mean, where it comes to like diagnoses, Greg, I wouldn't do that. I would really go somewhere for a professional to help me with it, to help me to really use the data in a way that would be more helpful. So as you move forward with this or getting a wearable, I think I would recommend making sure you find a health expert that's comfortable with dealing in this area of wearables, HRV and behavioral change. They can actually help you to look at all the data and to make some really great decisions with their support on what to do with it as you see it. So don't panic as you're hearing all these conversations, but just know wearable is good, but it's great when you have a health expert that's comfortable in this area supporting you on this journey with it.
Absolutely, because there's some things that are not within your control, right? That you have to be able to address. And you know, I have this number one thing when I do consults with individuals and say, hey, my heart rate variability is lower than I would like it. They look at, you know, various statistics based on the wearable and or the app of where, you know, people their age and sex are, like kind of have an idea of that and say, hey, it's lower than I want it to be. You know, what do I do? Right. And the first thing I always say is I need you to get a detailed amount of blood work done, right? At the very minimum to start. And the reason why is because again, I don't want any gigantic red flags from that standpoint. They have at this point they go see a doctor, they get the blood work done. They may find something from the blood work to do interpretation. Say, hey, maybe this is a little bit off. Maybe let's investigate into that standpoint. And this is one thing I just want to make sure. You know, majority of the people have had blood work done in the past or maybe a few years ago. I just want to make sure that that's, you know, we're setting the right framework from there. I always kind of look at health, physical health, absolutely first as a fundamental, making sure we rule out of the big red flags. There's no autoimmune conditions. There's no, you know, any kind of pre-diabetes, or there's, you know, people have hypertension. There's something that needs to be addressed from a medical standpoint that they have great tools to be able to provide. And then we start going down the rabbit hole of behaviors and start to be able to address those.
Oh, that's fantastic. I have a little bit of a cold, so I apologize. I'm going to go off camera every once in a while and get this little cough out. But, you know, getting the data is really cool from the wearable. But is there an app or a software that can actually help with helping you to process that data as well? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's the wearables are starting to go that route where they're starting to try to be able to figure out different areas and what they can calculate and everything like that. But there hasn't really, and there wasn't. And this is one of the big reasons. So I started a company in 2018. And it was made to solve my problem as a practitioner. The fact of, you know, when people come see me as an osteopath, more in the say the physical component of it all, people want a physical solution, right? They want some sort of, whether it's stretch or some sort of supplementation or alterations, you know, from that biological side of things. That's what they're looking for. When the grand scheme of things, you know, you look at the entire what we call the psychosocial model of health, all the areas, major areas that impact our health and well-being, they weren't necessarily looking at those. And it was a hard conversation to bridge the gap to say, hey, you know, there's other areas of health and well-being that are you know, influencing your condition that we aren't necessarily addressing, whether it's past trauma, whether it's, you know, their work environment, their home environment, whatever necessary that it may be, is that they weren't addressing certain areas but the expectation was coming to me is the fact that there's some sort of physical soul. I'm like, how do I have this conversation with the individual? How do I get everything? You know, can I have a way to look at this person as a whole from various factors and start to be able to have a standardized way to prioritize list of saying these areas need to be addressed more than others. And so we developed in 2019, we developed a preliminary software to start to look at that stuff. I started doing some formal research around it all. Originally, our baseline time frame was 35 days of wearable use to gather data, and then we had about 30 assessments that people had to run through. Quite extensive. It was through an app, so it was drip fed every day, so it wasn't like all at once and things like that. But like we had, you know, different assessments at different times, and we had a gigantic report, and And luckily, we had a phenomenal data science and research team that started to piece through the information to figure out, okay, well, what are the big ones that impact? And we started to look primarily at chronic pain to start, because that seems to be a very underserved population that the biopsychosocial model can really help with. And then from all that information, we found that if we gather 10 nights of information or 10 days and nights of information from the wearable, and we ask 10 factors around the biopsychosocial model that comprise the major factors that we know that people that suffer from, health and well-being conditions don't, score very well in, where people that are healthy score well in. Can we have this, the system in place and actually show that it's going to be a benefit? So we now have a 10-factor biopsychosocial assessment that looks at 10 different areas of your health and well-being, and it pairs with your wearable product. We don't have a wearable. I never want to be a wearable. It's a software. So we've integrated with a company called BioStrap, Oura Ring, Fitbit, and then we're going through the list as we go forward. We're adding more and more wearables in every month to be able to add that in, so people can provide that. So if you have one of those wearables, if you look at our website, our company's called HealthQB. You go to yourhealthqb.com. If you have a wearable that pairs, you get onto our app. You can take this assessment and see where you're at, and to give some direction of saying, what area of my health and well-being am I maybe neglecting that would have a big impact into my, aging well.
Oh, wow. What is the website address?
Yeah, it's yourhealthqb.com.
Okay.
The company's called HealthQB, it's again mainly it stemmed from the fact that we want to give people a true whole health assessment. It's not super crazy in depth, but we want to look at the 30,000-foot view. As you know, with nutrition, it can be extremely nuanced. Same with exercise, all that. And we wanted to say, hey, is this a major problem, right? Or are you doing the basics from here? And then we look at that from all areas of health, and then we start to be able to drive, and then we can start to dig in. So someone like yourself, you can start to be able to piece that information, saying, hey, your sleep you scored really low on your sleep subjectively. The wearable's a little bit off. Let's talk about it a little bit more. What's going on with that? And start to dive in. And this is where supporting mechanisms around that conversation can be had a little bit easily, because this impartial software looked at, hey, this is a prioritized list. It may not be exactly what they want to work on, but at least we have to be able to address and have a conversation around it, into what's going on, and maybe dig into the reasons that's there.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's a nice way that doesn't feel that you're attacking them either on lifestyle or behavior. It's a very gentle approach to the behavioral change.
That's one of the biggest things. He said that, I say that all the time, is when I'm dealing with somebody in front of me, say that it's someone that has chronic fatigue syndrome, and they're looking to, say, maybe get back into exercise, or they're looking for anything from nutrition that's a supplement or that type of area. That's what their expectation. And I start to talk about, their mindset around their condition, or, the way that they, deal with very emotional states, or the reactions, to start talking about those things. And it's like more of a psychological type of conversation. They do feel judged. Like it is, they take it personally. It's like, well, then you're saying it's me that's the problem, right? Into this, which is a difficult thing sometimes to have that conversation as a practitioner. And I just want to be able to have that data view where it's not just me saying it's my opinion versus you don't think it is. And so we're not going to get anywhere. But if we have some sort of assessment, some sort of tool that says, hey, you answer these questions, let's take a look at them. Hey, we scored here, which is not where we need to be able to be. This is what it means. What do you think about this? And have a conversation. You can, like I said, bridge that conversation a little bit more about addressing certain areas, which makes it, way more digestible, I think, for the patient to say, oh, okay, I never thought of that. And it's not just someone's subjective opinion. There's some sort of hard data that's rooted in validated questionnaires and surveys that can give some legitimacy to this conversation.
I love it, because I love when clients or patients are able to really get the awareness on their own from the data, and you just can go, well, what do you think it means? And they can dive right into everything you would have wanted to say, and they're leading the conversation. I think this is one of those tools that give you the opportunity to have the self-awareness as a as someone who's wearing a wearable device. And I think self-awareness is like huge. No, it doesn't matter what I think it doesn't matter what my opinions are, but when it comes down to your own, and when I reinforce it, like, yeah, what do you think? I think you're probably right. Um, when your opinion is reinforced, I think people tend to take more action and be willing to
Oh my
take
gosh,
more action.
you're absolutely correct. And we said this early on when we're doing this, a lot of our research, the information from the HRV side, the wearable side, was blinded, so that people wouldn't actually be able to see their data. They only can say that they're when to charge their wearable device. So they during the 35 days they had no feedback at all based on anything. The best intervention that we had for people that had no idea what was going on, the best information was awareness of where they're at. Right? They come back and they look at their heart rate or heart rate variability and be like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know it was this low." Comparatively to where I should be, and that type of stuff. And you see the exponential increase after 35 days of having a specific value. You would see all of a sudden, boom, HRV go up into that, and just they became aware of what their information was after the fact, and then we tracked them for 5 weeks afterwards. And you start to see that exponential increase into HRV, just the fact of being aware as to where they're at. So you have what you said, like so many gems, even what you're saying. And that sort of stuff, and I passed over some of the stuff in that, but you're hitting the nail right on the head, and everything that you're stating is absolutely true.
Well, I'm really excited. I'm more enthusiastic about wearing my wearable and setting it up in a system where I can even use the data to be more helpful. And I bet other people are too. So, Greg, what do you think the first step hit? Like, I want to find this data. I want to have it in a format that it can be more useful for me. What's the first thing I need to do?
Yeah, the first thing is we talked about is if you don't have a wearable, start people to track it. So get one.
Okay.
And it depends on the wearable of what you want to do out of it, right? So there's two primarily wearables that are there. There's the smart watches, which is like the Apple Watch, the Garmin's, and some of the Fitbits where they have functionality to them. Then there's other wearables that are purely just about the data and information. So the ones from the smartwatches, way more understandable, and they're all getting significantly better. Fitbit, yes, as I said back in the past, their heart rate was all the map. They're definitely getting better to where their higher quality devices are getting pretty good in that standpoint. As you alluded with Apple Watch, they're even getting FDA approval for detection of AFib. So the smartwatches are getting there. The only thing that's been difficult is the fact, because of the display and the functionalities, the battery life tends to be a hard component of it all. So it's hard to have that higher quality sensors, which drain the battery life significantly. So it's always a fine play between the quality of the sensors and the functionality of the device. So there's that kind of give and take that happens with those. So if you want something that's a little more functional with that standpoint, and something you want to be able to use a little bit more, but you also want the data, smartwatches are a good option. But if you're really into the data, and data quality is what you really want to get at it for a specific reason, the wearable route is a little bit more, because it's purely about the sensors and the information that it provides. And so this is, companies like Whoop, and companies like Oura Ring, which is a ring-based wearable, which I have right here. You can see.
I do. Easy,
I must admit,
too.
I don't have. Again, I have no benefit for any of these companies to suggest these things. This is purely from my experiences with them. There's another company called BioStrap, but they're more of a business to business. But yeah,
and the Oura Ring is waterproof.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So shower with it, sleep with it.
Don't have to take it off. Only to charge about once a week.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And data quality from the Oura Ring is probably one of the best that's out there. And the reason why I love them is the fact that they produce a lot of research from the wearable, looking at to be able to be the gold standard in various areas. So they produce their, they show their sleep algorithm versus this PSG. Yeah, but the polysonogram, the gold standard. They look at looking at their heart metrics through, ECGs. And so they're really trying to be as, the high quality data coming through them. They're a phenomenal company from that standpoint. That's why we like them. They're very transparent with their information. That's why I like them a lot. But yes, you get the wearable side, which is more about the data, but then you have smartwatch is more about functionality. So it's about start gathering that and then just seeing where you're at. And you get some of these numbers that come from wearable devices. Take a look, and then from there you change a couple things, right? You can change your diet, you can change your exercise routine, you could change your sleep patterns, you could start meditating, and just see what your information does as a result. It's a great behavior feedback loop to determine if. Because, how many times have you heard, you talked about this in one of your podcasts, when it comes to meditation, people try it and they're like, yeah, it's not for me.
All the time.
How do you know, right? And I always use the example of this. You say, you've never heard of exercise, really. You see people do it. You've never really experienced exercise before, right? And you go, okay, exercise is great for you. Go exercise. You go exercise. What happens is your blood pressure goes up. You get exhausted. You're tired. Next day you can't move. All type of stuff. It's like, yeah, it's not for me. That's not good, right? I didn't respond to it well. It's like, well, really? Is that, if you look at the research, is that the best thing that it's for you, is to just not exercise? How do you know that it's not good for you, really? And so it's very similar to these, meditation or body scan, positive imagery, all these areas. It's you need that feedback mechanism, and wearables provide that feedback mechanism. Then start to look at your sleep quality or your biometrics, and if these things are going the right direction, you can determine if you're doing the right type of intervention, or the right amounts, or things need to be able to change, or if you're doing the right thing. It gives great feedback into your behavior change.
That's fantastic. I want to thank you. We're running out of time. I want to thank you for being here, and this has been incredibly informative and helpful about wearables. I think we have your email address. We're going to add things to the show notes. So whatever you put in the show notes, it'll be there. So if you have any more questions for Greg at all, you'll be able to find him on Greg's show notes. You'll be able to reach him with his contact information. So thank you. And Greg, is there anything that we missed that we should definitely touch on?
No, I think again, the main thing to me is understanding if you don't have a wearable, it's a great way to determine, the right health and well-being choices that you're utilizing. I think it's something to get into. 40% of people are in the US have some sort of wearable device. But I think, as the quality goes up, it's going to be even better. But no, it's to me, there's a lot of free resources out there about wearables now. And if you want to dig deep a little bit more, there's professionals out there that now do it remotely, these consultations. And if you don't know one, a specific area, whenever it may be, if you head to gregelliott.ca and you go there and you do a quick discovery call, we'll talk about any type of area that you want to be able to focus on. I'm happy to point you in the right direction from that standpoint. So, my hope is people understand that they have a significant amount of agency, significant of control over their health and well-being, and wearables help them enact the right ones for them.
Great. Hey, thanks again. And you are listening to Your Health Moment. Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Health Moment podcast. If you enjoyed what you've heard, you can visit our website, yourhealthmoment.com, for past episodes, show notes, and all the resources that we mentioned on the show. Feel free to connect with me on social media too. Send me a DM and let me know what your thoughts are about the episodes that you've been listening to. And don't be shy about requesting any other show topics that you might like to explore.